Hi there, it's Ina here and welcome to my art room. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, and please push the bell icon so you will receive notification of all my regular uploads. Today I have a new journal for you, and as you can see, it's pretty chunky. It's made out of fabric in a bit of a boho style, and it is meant to be written in. Now that makes it very different to the last two journals I posted, which were interactive art journals, but I needed a place to just jot down thoughts, write letters in, and so on. I'm not a diary keeper or a novel writer, so I don't need a book with a whole bunch of empty pages, which to me are a bit intimidating, and I rarely finish a book like that. But I broke it up a little bit and you will see what I mean. I think this will suit my needs much more. It's more fun to me, and I hope you like the idea as well. Now, I did not film the making of this journal because a lot of details went into this, a lot of sewing and so on, but it is pretty simple, and like always I will explain what I did to put the cover together, how I created the pages, and so on. So to start with, I will show you some photos. So now I have to switch to voiceover for a little bit, and I started my cover by first ripping a piece of simple linen fabric and pinning the edges, and then I added some tie-back just from an old envelope. It just makes everything more sturdy. I pinned it, I also sewed the edges, and then I found a nice material to go on the inside of the cover. As you can see, I also added a little bit of lace to the right side, and here it is all sewn up, including the addition of a little loop so I can create a closure. Then I turned it over and pinned 3 different types of materials to the top, just the way it seemed to look good to me, and went on to sew it on, first around each separate piece of fabric, but then also around the whole cover, so it gave it a bit of a quilt-like look. And next I will go on to show you how I created the pages. Now, for the purpose of showing you how I put my signatures together, I use simple book pages. You can use any paper you have as long as it's strong enough to withstand a bit of sewing. I collected a bunch of lace here to use in my project. I have different colors, small pieces, large pieces, and you definitely don't need that much. I also collected a whole bunch of fabric. Now, some are just leftover pieces from things I have in my fabric stash, but I also found some really nice pieces at a thrift store, quilters leftover pieces, and combined with some of the more simpler fabric, I think it gave a nice variety. So my next step is to just lay out some fabric on my page. It's like collaging, really, only that you use fabric instead of paper. Now, laying it out on a piece of paper helps me to keep a certain size and also makes it all sturdier and easier to sew. So I place the fabric going over the edges a little bit, and when I have the background covered, I use my glue stick just to keep them in place, just a little bit. It's easier that way to put it under the machine. Then I sew around the edges and also around the individual pieces, and then I cut it to the size of the paper. That way I have a good idea about the size. And then next I added pockets, again in a large variety of sizes and colors, and I sewed them up again on the machine. And that's where the beauty comes in on working on a single page, because you don't sew anything shut on the other side. So I added lace here and there. I added sometimes a corner pocket. Sometimes I doubled the materials. Sometimes I lined it with another piece of fabric. So I went ahead and sewed all the pockets. And when the pockets were all done, I did some of the edges. Sometimes I used a piece of material to edge it. Sometimes I used a piece of lace, or some edges are just done with a zigzag, just to make it a little more sturdy. And I did 4 of these for each signature. Now I also used some burlap, so here and there, because it gives such a nice texture and effect. So let me show you what 2 of my actual pages look like. So here is the back side. I used some handmade paper, I used some coffee dye paper, and you can see the edging. And here is the front. All the sewing is done, all the pockets are done, all the lace decoration is done, and I can put them together for a signature. Now, if these are my decorated pages, I turned them over and then used a piece of Tyvek for a hinge. This is again taken from an old envelope. I just crease it in the middle, and I actually tuck it down with glue in my fabric version as well, but then I also took it under the machine and sewed it all down. So those are my first 2 pages, and the Tyvek gives it a very sturdy and very easy to manage spine. Next, I added the next 2 pages, this time with the decoration facing me, of course, and they go right on top of the spine here. And that's pretty much the secret to putting single pages together as a signature. Pretty simple. Now I added another little variation, and that is one of these big tags. That is absolutely not necessary. You don't have to do so. But I added this again with a Tyvek spine, same idea. The only thing is the tag was just single, so I couldn't embed the Tyvek. I had to glue it on top of one of the sides. So in order to hide it, I only decorated the tag on one side before attaching it here. And then I went back under my machine and decorated the other side while it was already one big signature. But it wasn't too difficult because it is not too bulky and can be easily done. So this is the way I put my signatures together, and I hope that the way I explained it and showed it to you is clear enough for you to follow. Now, because of the double pages, I was able to create 2 more simple pockets. On the left side, I closed just the top and the bottom for an opening on the side. On this side, I left the top open and only closed the bottom. That was the last step I took on these signatures. Now they're all done, and let's get back to my final journal. Let's take a closer look. Of course, many more details went into putting this journal together than just the cover and the pages, but I will try to explain as we go. First of all, the closure. It is just a simple wraparound. I used this craft yarn here, which has a lovely texture and comes in these great variation of colors, and I thought it matched it just right. It is attached, of course, to the loop I sewed to the edge, and here at the end it has 2 beads. So when I open the cover, you see this old vintage doily, and this I just sewed on by hand just for a little interest. Now here on the edge of the cover you can see the linen fabric which I started with, and because it's sewn down really tight, it has kind of a neat finishing look. But everything else is pretty much frayed. My sewing is not exact. There are strings and fibers here and there, and I wanted it this way. It didn't have to look perfect to me. So let's open it up. So you have probably guessed by now that this book is full of pockets and tucks. Now I was going to call it a pocket journal, but I think that's very misleading, unless of course you have a very large pocket. So I filled all the pockets and tucks with things to write on. I used up a lot of materials I had in my stash. For instance, a lot of tags. I had so many single tags in different sizes and shapes I had received in the mail and so on, and they've all found a home here. I also used a lot of coffee dye paper. I made a whole batch, including some handmade paper. I had some deli paper I dyed. I had some ledger paper, some book pages, and some simple copy paper. So because the pages are already very colorful, I kept all the writing pages in that kind of coffee dyed or craft paper color. Now, this journal got very chunky because I filled it up to the brim. But of course it would be nice for you to see what it looks like when it's not all stuffed. So as I go through it, I will show you everything, but then I won't return it until later on, so you can get a good look at the structure and the basic pages. So in the beginning here I used this material because it has great black stripes going all through it, and so when I did the sewing on this side, it hardly shows up, or rather blends into the design. I started the front cover with 3 pockets for pens or pencils, and it also has a little pocket for an eraser right here. So on to my pages. Now this journal only has 2 signatures because each one of them is rather bulky and holds a lot of extra materials. So I sewed them in with a little distance between them, and I used my machine to do so, and you may be able to see the stitching lines right here. So here on the first page you see 2 double tags. I added some craft paper I had to it. They each got some fiber, and I always distress the edges using my distress ink. Now I did this all through the book. I also used the ink to do some stenciling here and there, so I won't be mentioning it over and over again. So the rest here on the front page are just some coffee dyed copy papers, and I just folded them and decorated them a tiny bit, and those will be fun to write on, and they give quite a lot of space. So now you can see my fabric cover here. There is a pocket made with some burlap, there are some little flowers, there is a little tuck spot, lace. And here is one of my little safety pin decoration. I use them throughout the book, just here and there. I use different size pins and just add some beads to them. And that's the first page. And then of course here in the first big pocket, I have another page to write on. Now I had a bunch of these cool looking pages, and so I thought they fit perfectly in the color and style, and those would be great for writing letters on. Next page right over here, this is where we have the tag. I created a small little writing pad just with some copy paper and a small tag I folded over and did a little bit of sewing on. Then over here we have just a little tag to write on. And here in the pocket I have some old vintage library cards and a little file folder, fabric right here, and a paper clip. And on this page here I created a long skinny pocket here, a little corner tag with a little belly band and another band up here. Next page I made a rather large pocket and a little corner tuck. Now I try to vary the pockets so they are not too identical. I made them all different in size and shape, including all the things that go inside of it, except maybe the tags. So here is the double tag, and then over here I created another little writing pad, this time using deli papers. It has some distressed paper here, and I happen to have one sheet of printed on vellum paper, and I used it all throughout for a few other items. This one I sewed up with a bit of burlap up here on the top, and it has also a little safety pin with some beads and this fun little fringe up here. And here in the top pocket there is another one of my writing papers. And this is the first big tag. There's an envelope here and a little tag over here. This one is double. It has a pocket made out of craft paper and a little note. This was actually a thank you note which I received, but the color was perfect. So I changed it so it is still suitable for writing in. And then here on the other side is just another tag held together with a paper clip. Here is a very skinny envelope. I took it apart and covered it in tissue paper, and inside here I also added some old book paper. It has some nice coffee dyed ledger paper in it, And I have these 2 pages from an old shorthand instruction book, and I thought it was just so cool and worth keeping. So these things live in here for now. And I have this little pin that keeps it closed, but of course I could also pin notes to it or whatever I might need it for. So on this side of the tag I created 2 pockets, and because this was a single piece I worked on with fabric and sewing, I did not add any pocket on this side but rather 2 doilies. That was a lot easier on the sewing because these I tucked down by hand, and therefore I didn't have to watch out not sewing these pockets closed. And here on the top I added a little tassel I had. I crocheted it on with some brown yarn right there. And the next page here has a little booklet and a little envelope. Here I created a belly band with a little circular fabric design. There's a name for these, but sorry, can't think of it. I also made a little pocket on the bottom. I always think belly bands do well with a pocket on the bottom so things don't slip out. Then I made this little booklet. I added another piece of my vellum paper in a way that it was a pocket. Here is kind of a fun shaped tag. And here on the inside it just has some copy paper, another tuck spot, another tag, and everything can be written on. There's room here and there's also room here in the back. And these little items, even some of the other ones I showed you, I sewed them together. So all the spines are sewed and the pockets are sewed. And then I found another one of these little envelopes. This came to me with a little card, and I took it apart and added some altered craft paper to it and glued it back together, and I think it just looks really nice. It feels nice too. And it has a piece of ledger paper again, just to write notes on, or thoughts, or lists, or to-do lists, or shopping lists, who knows. So next here I created 2 more items. This is a little booklet. Here I used the handmade paper, which has a really nice feel, and I had this textured paper which I added as a pocket. Another little tag right here, and the paper inside is just ledger paper in different colors, and another tuck spot and another tag here at the very end. And this is a big tuck spot. A lot of these, the back side of them were just recycled packaging. I think this had a stencil in it, but the design was nice and had a great color. So I added a second tag to it, connected with a cute little paper clip. And this can of course be used to hold other papers as well. So here is another one of my safety pins, this time one big one. And of course I have this pocket here, which is obvious to see, but this page is special because it has also a secret pocket. Now, secret pockets with the opening towards the spine are really only possible because this book has a soft spine. So I wouldn't recommend it if you have a hard spine, because it will be nearly impossible to get in and out of a secret pocket positioned this way. So this is just a little card for writing on. Again, always some stenciling. Oh, before I forget, of course, oh no, I took this one out here. This is the next one. So here's another one of my writing paper. These all came together in a set. There were, I think, 4 or 5 different designs, and they're all really cool looking. So those be fun to write on. Next I have a little booklet which can be taken out. I created this with handmade paper. It has bits and pieces of plant material in it. I used a piece of seam binding to hold it together, and it has fun papers taken from a score pad. I believe it's Bridge or some other card game. These were found in a thrift store and gifted to me, so here they live in my little book. And then at the end I added another little pocket. and a few more cards to write on. Again, always using my coffee dyed paper. And this one actually has lines, and I found one way to do lines which are not too straight or, you know, not too professional looking. I use my distress ink and just the edge of my credit card, and if you get just enough ink on there, it makes these nicely distressed lines, which I quite like. So this little book lives here in this little loop, and then on the same page I have a little booklet here, again made from the vellum paper, and this one holds deli paper, and I hold it together with a paper clip. I thought adding a few paper clips may come in handy. And then there are 3 round tags, mostly because these pockets ended up being rather small, so this was the only thing I could think of which would fit, and why not? They're fun, maybe they can hold some little memory. So on this page I have a pocket here which goes kind of diagonal. I have the loop for the book and 3 pockets under the lace. And the next page here has a rather large pocket right in the corner, and I made a little notepad for it. This is some craft paper, but it had the writing lines on one side and some printed writing on the other side. I again added a little pocket and 2 more tags which can be written on. And the whole thing is made out of the handmade paper. I had this ephemera card, and I sewed it up together, even adding a little lace right there. And in the small pocket I have a tiny postcard and a tiny tag. Now this fabric was so fun, and I doubled it for the pocket to make it strong enough, and I added the little pocket here with the same material and the lace just to brighten it up a little bit. So there's this one, and here's already my second tag. On this side I created a pocket with a closure, and I had this old ticket. It says the date is September 61, so quite old, and it's a train ticket, and I just folded it over, added some book pages, and made a tiny little booklet out of this. It's also just sewn up. So here I have another one of my safety pins. I also have another one of my tassels, and of course I have another one of my papers to write on right here on the top, and another paper clip. And again on this, oops, see, I told you, fibers everywhere. And on this side I also just added some doily decorations. And here on the last page of my signatures I have 2 more items. This was made out of 2 tags. They had some print on it, and I added some of the handmade, very delicate paper to it, 2 different designs, just taped it together, and then sewed in a tiny little signature, just a piece from some ledger paper. And it gives room to write, and again I did those very faded lines here to indicate writing space. So there's this. And another little pad, this time ledger paper and copy paper, a mix. I used some handmade paper up here, and I sewed it all up on some more ledger paper. There is a tiny bit of cardboard here which was left over from some packaging as well. Now on this page I used a piece of lace which came from an old t-shirt. I added some fabric underneath it to make it a little more sturdy, and it made a nice big pocket. So this was the last page from the signatures, but it's not the end of my journal yet, because I added a little booklet here at the very end. Now it's made from fabric as well. It has some lace, some simple decorations, and a very simple closure. And I made it in a way that it comes out completely. Again, I just sewed in one of these loops. And here on the inside I used some handmade paper someone had gifted to me. It has this pretty embroidery on it. I also added an extra piece of linen to the spine, and my first and last page is very sturdy, just to give this whole journal a little more strength. So here I added some fabric to the other side of ledger paper. I sewed all around the edges. I added some lace and also a tuck right here. Now this was made from some handmade paper which has these pretty fibers in it. Here are two simple tags. And then here on the inside, of course, there's room to write. I added some of this pretty paper which has leaves and grasses on it, and then some rice paper. Now rice paper is very thin, and so I have quite a few pages here, but it is quite nice to write on, and it seems it works best with ballpoint pens or pencil. So more of the pretty paper here, more rice paper. And then of course more space here to write, and then I ended it with a little tuck spot here. I used just a tag I had, added a little flower, and then I made a little envelope from the last bits of vellum paper I had, and it just holds some coffee dyed deli paper. So, and then of course it closes, and this can be completely taken out, and so can of course everything else in this book. Or before I close it, I wanted to show you something else. I nearly forgot. So I wanted to make sure that this little booklet has also removable pages. So it has a very, very simple spine. All I need to do is open this little ribbon. I can take everything out, and you can see it's just attached here. I sewed it right here on the spine, left a little piece on the bottom, a long piece on the top, and it holds the pages in. And of course that makes it easy to put new pages in should these buns be all full and written on, or if I just want different type of paper. Now I purposely made the whole journal in a way that I can take everything out, I can put completely different papers in, and it could serve me in different ways. So let me close it and let me show you how thin it is when everything is taken out. So, and also it is very soft. It has a little bit of strength because of the tie rack and the paper I used, and I like that. It's not floppy. It will stand up in my bookshelf, but it is very flexible. It can get squished into any kind of bag. So I will be taking it with me on my next holiday. Now here are all the things which came out of it, and as you can see it's quite a lot, and there's a nice variation of big pieces of paper and smaller ones, envelopes and so on. So I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. Now making this journal was not complicated, but it was very time consuming, so this is not a quick project, but a great project to use up all the fibers you have, the fabric, the lace, and even odds and ends of papers. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really hope you enjoyed this time here with me, and I hope you come soon again to see me. Bye bye for now.